and I don't know. Maybe it shouldn't. Maybe you should have to go to an FFL for any transfers. A lot of states have adopted language like this in their
Hey,
laws.
what was the thing you said again, Toggy? I had to like do a second recording because it would have been too long to like
I
download it on my phone and stuff.
sorry, I forget which
You
part.
said something about the parking lot. You said convention center parking
Oh
lots.
well, yeah. I mean,
And
like
guys, right?
anyone can sell anything in private very easily. So like anyone can sell
yeah.
something. Anyone can strike a deal like in a parking lot.
Well, especially
So
like
like
if you have ghost guns, right? You doesn't even have a
yeah.
serial number on them. You make them.
So like it's kind of not the gun show loophole. It's kind of like the private sale loophole, and like you know, you can say only at gun shows, but I don't think that really does what you want to accomplish.
Maybe
when
the
you
better
complain about them.
conversation is not just the laws that we could potentially pass, although I don't know if I see any of that happening very soon because of the way who's in our government and the NRA. But I would say though, like not just the laws we could pass, but how we enforce them. So what do we have the ATF do once we have these laws in place?
Why don't we do it the same way?
Technically, I mean, in my opinion, the executive should only be for federal enforcement, and they should not be for creating the law. But that opinion is more about wanting to punish Congress and make them have to decide these things. Because I'm tired of them. I'm tired of them passing the buck to policy setting agencies and to the court when really it's their job.
The pistol brace policy that
I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated with. Like I can understand the ATF's position, but I'm frustrated with them. I'm frustrated with them because these things were on sale for more than 3 years, no fucking issue, and now suddenly the ATF is saying that you could be a 10-year felon for owning what they said was legal for 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we should make
and making you register for something that they told you was legal in order to keep it. You know what the fuck is that? You know, like isn't it my property?
I think there's something that's supposed to prevent, like let's say that you did something that eventually became illegal, but it was before you knew it was illegal. Isn't there like some kind of like provision in the Constitution about that, like
I don't know. It was the ATF's own position that it was legal. So like they just changed their minds, and now they say that you have to go register. And by the way, they're illegal.
Right, but you can't have an ex post facto. That's the word, like law or.
Yeah, well, the ATF is alleging it was always the case, and they were just mistaken.
Oh.
It's kind of like they're saying we don't really make the law, but you know, if you disobey what we say, we're going to punish you like we make the law.
So they're trying to be like the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
They're not.
No, that's pretty much what that's what the Supreme Court does half the time now.
Yeah.
They fix problems for a Congress that is unwilling to make decisions. And you can be mad at me for saying it, but like the Supreme Court in some ways wasn't even wrong overturning Roe because like it's Congress that should have solved that problem. Like they should not have thrusted that problem onto the judiciary. It did not belong in that courtroom. It belonged settled long before it got to them. But, you know, Congress won't deal with it because they don't want to give an up or down vote to something as hot as abortion. They don't want to get blamed for it. They're cowards.
Yep, absolutely. And now look what happened. Now it's a state issue. But now it's a state issue. And in some states, it's virtually illegal or just completely illegal, even with incest and rape cases. They're just out there even when the mother's life is at risk. Quite a few right-wing states that make that illegal.
It was always a possible thing that could have happened, and honestly, it's probably the correct constitutional interpretation. Like as horrible as that is.
Well, now they're going even further. Now they're attacking people's rights to contraceptives. Birth control.
Yeah, they're trying to see how much they can flex this whole state, this whole federalist concept.
Well, Federalist Society. They're trying to see how much they can turn the clock back. That's basically how I see it.
I mean, I don't completely hate federalism. I think living in a different state should be to some degree like living in another country.
Right. But then you have people in Congress, like, what was it, Lindsey Graham, Republican, who proposed outlawing abortion federally, which is interesting because I thought it was a state issue among Republicans. But now we're starting to see their true colors.
It's a state issue until Congress creates laws.
Right. And their whole thing, making it a state issue was just the first step. They're going to try to make it federally banned if they can.
Well, at least she's willing to deliver an up or down vote on the issue to where the Supreme Court wouldn't have to handle it. At least she's not like lying about what she's about, and she's not like deflecting it onto some other agency so that she doesn't have to be held accountable. I'm talking about any congressperson that is willing to vote up or down on this issue has more balls. Yeah. Has more balls than the Congress when Roe v. Wade was enshrined.
Well, you should see what Tim Scott has to say about it. He kind of goes back and forth.
Yeah.
That guy. Jeez.
So he's willing to be on the record, but he can't commit.
Exactly. But then again, he also preaches celibacy to people. But then when he's asked the question whether he's a virgin or not, he cannot directly answer the question. Because he's not, probably. He's preaching celibacy when he's had sex before marriage.
I mean, there's nothing inherently like wrong with being like a actionable hypocrite as long as like you admit your faults.
I don't know. I don't think he should be selling that when he ain't he's not the poster boy for it. He's trying.
But he could take it. He could take it from an angle of here's why it's been bad for my life.
Right, and here's why you shouldn't do it. Right.
Well, here's the negative consequences it's had for me. Like would be like something for him to say.
To be fair, a lot of these people are also really trying hard to get people to get married when they're in their early 20s. So. They're like, hurry up, get married. Forget your career, huh?
They got me.
No, but you know about that, right? Different right-wing figures who are like they're trying to tell women to get married and to be housewives in their early 20s, right?
Yeah, you can't even convince the ones that want to because like they need a second job in order to afford independent living.
You see what they're doing though, right? They think that in their minds, they think that as soon as a woman gets married to the man just decides the political decisions for them. They're like, oh yeah, they'll suddenly become right wing when they get married. It's hilarious. Like, don't you think?
You're I don't know. Like, you're probably gonna create a horrible divorce.
Well, a lot of these people they don't really see women as people.
Yeah.
But they won't admit it. Jason, what would you say to that?
To what, that they don't see the women as people?
Yeah, that's why they think that like say Jesse Waters from Fox News was
somebody.
Well,
who's they? Because that's really broad strokes,
Well, I'll give you an example. Jesse Waters was doing a segment where he's like, you should go out and get married. This is why we're losing votes.
Yeah, well, I think what you're saying. Huh? So you're seeing a party that is largely dwindling, like in terms of their support. And so where is their support? Their support is with evangelicals. And so a lot of the positions that they have is going to be aimed for them and what they want to hear. And so when they're talking about marriage in that way, I mean, that's a largely like Christian value, family value type of thing, right? I don't think a lot of them even view women as, things, even though I do believe that ideology brings in people like Jesse Waters, who I think literally looked like a rapist. And, it's going to appeal to those people, obviously, right?
Well, it's just like people on the, what was it? The Daily Wire. I think I showed you a clip of this a while back where
exactly that
Andrew Klavan and Ben Shapiro and Jesse Peterson, I think.
I realized my wife is a person.
Yeah, he's like, after 10 years, I realized she was a human being. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
That shit cracks me up, man.
Maybe he'll figure out that his wife bleeds every month too, if he really pays attention. Yeah,
I realize she's a person.
I think a lot of what you see too is how lucrative the Republican Party is. Like a lot of these people get into this type of position because it has money, man. It has like billionaire donors.
Well, of course, there's plenty of sellouts like Dave Rubin.
Yeah, but you also have to understand, like their agenda is not the same as. Well, let me put it another way. The evangelicals, they are a thing here. Like there's a significant portion of the population. You living in Texas, you know this. There's a significant portion that still adhere to like that type of stuff, right? But maybe the people who are controlling those churches, they're the same as the billionaires who have the same agenda, perhaps. But those billionaires who have those agendas, their agenda is not the same as the evangelicals. They don't give a shit about abortion. But what they do give a shit about is these deregulations that will bring upon more of what they want if they are more if they adhere more to evangelicals. And I think these Congress people they largely don't give a shit about this. They're just saying what they're saying because they have to.
Well, because their strings are being pulled by these very people.
And I mean, Togi's like, again, most of these people have probably had like 8 abortions. Like what's his name?
Right.
The football Beavis lookalike from Florida, Matt Gaetz. Dude had like a DUI he got out of, and he's talking about how stronger on crime and shit. Like they're hypocrites because they have to be wishy-washy.
I guess they could be the experts on it, right? They know all about it.
They've all done the most horrible
shit. I'd have more respect for it if they called the elephant out in the room to their own hypocrisy and just talk about like why it was bad for them.
And this is why Democrats should do exactly what you say, because I don't think that strategy is good. Because at least my experience with people in general, people to the left at least are a lot more cynical and a lot more pessimistic. And that wishy-washy, that hyperbole bullshit, it just doesn't go anywhere. So one reason why, like, even fucking going back, and I mean, I was a baby when this was the case, but still, nonetheless, just reading about it and watching it now, it's one of the reasons Ross Perot was such a big force. Because you had 2 of those types of things. You had Dole on it. Was it Dole? I think it was Dole. No.
Dole, Clinton.
George Bush. George Bush on one end saying his bullshit. Clinton on the other saying his bullshit. Nobody could get a straight answer. Then Ross Perot said, "We should ban all those motherfuckers." Like, it worked for him. A big one was NAFTA during that time. Clinton was proposing it. Bush didn't want to say no because he knew what it would mean for his donors. So he was wishy-washy with it. And Ross Perot, even though I disagreed with him, at the same time, he gave a straight answer. And he got 20% of the vote, something like that.
What was it that George H.W. Bush is infamous for saying in his campaign? No new taxes. Read my lips, or something like that.
Read my lips.
And then there were taxes.
Yeah, because they need to. Like, you're gonna have to get revenue somewhere.
Right. For the war that he in the Gulf, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a recession after that too, just like his son.
So some interesting facts about George H.W. Bush. His family, I think, had owned oil wells or whatever, right?
Yep.
Like a bunch of oil, like land for oil. He was also he was a director of the CIA, right?
Yep.
So that's interesting.
Yep.
And they went to war. Him and his son had basically gotten it. Well, really, it was largely Dick Cheney in that instance, but somewhat him. To go to war in places that had quite a bit of oil.
Well, not only that, but also going to places and fighting against people he trained, like Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, dude. It's crazy how that works, right?
ISIS.
They fucking sell out the people that they fucking train in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do it over and over. Mujahideen, ISIS, fucking all of them.
Yeah, I mean it's proxy shit, Cold War shit all over again. It's just, today is your friend, tomorrow your enemy type of stuff. You use them and then you throw them away when they're,
no use anymore.
And then you're surprised that they've established a barbaric kingdom,
Exactly.
What did you expect them to do? You left them with a whole bunch of grenades and weapons.
Yeah, about Afghanistan, man, talk about a mess. Like that country, and no offense to Afghanis, but yeah.
No, it's unfixable. It's a shithole and it's unfixable. And we're not the first to try, and we're not the first to go bankrupt trying. And the histories count. We are the third.
Even talking about like Al Qaeda's, or wasn't excuse me, the Taliban's role in dealing with Al Qaeda. Like, people even have to understand the only thing that they did was give Al Qaeda an operation in Afghanistan. Like, they're two different entities, right? And they even got tired of Al Qaeda's bullshit after like a while, and they kicked them out, So like it's hard to imagine trying to go to war with a terrorist organization that doesn't have a country, and we go to war with Afghanistan targeting the Taliban, who's largely not really responsible for what had happened.
They're responsible for a lot of shit, or at least they're accessories to a lot of shit.
Yeah, it's more
there's good reason. There's good reasons to punch the Taliban in the teeth if you can, just to do it. But like, I don't know. I don't see what we got out of all that. At the end of the day, we turned the country back over anyways, and I'm not sure it's conquerable or winnable. Like, they can hide in a cave for 200 years if they have to. So. Yeah. I don't think there's doing anything about it unless we're willing to take a page from Britain and like colonize it and send like 1 million Americans there every year. Then maybe we could do it. But short of that, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's always just going to be this savage, like, mountain country. It's basically like a jihadi, like it's fucking jihadi Switzerland.
Well, there are countries that we, you could say we rule as far as like soft power.
Yeah.
But Afghanistan is a totally different creature.
Yeah. It can't be fully contained with soft power. Again, it's like Switzerland. It's just way too easy to hide there.
Instead of banks, they have caves.
Yeah. I mean, so does Switzerland. That's part of the problem with conquering Switzerland. They have bunkers and caves, and their bridges are loaded with dynamite. If you want to invade Switzerland, all the infrastructure went boom. Good luck, fascists. It's actually true. Like, you take any major piece of infrastructure into Switzerland, you're driving over a bomb. It's strategically placed there.
It's also crazy. Off my conquering Switzerland off my list then.
Well, they did it to like ensure that they would be neutral no matter what happened. World War III could happen, and they'll just sever themselves from all of Europe and create a buffer.
I guess I gotta get off the call here, but it's been fun, and peace on earth. I wish give Rad my best.
Of course.
All right, peace.
So, I guess you're a co-host of mine now, Toggy. Well, you technically were before, but or maybe you're just a guest. I don't know. You're Toggy, huh?
Yeah.
So I was just gonna jump to this topic here. What do you think about the idea of Medicare for all?
I think it makes sense.
It cuts out the middleman. I know that the insurance company, which is the
I think like there can be abuses with it, but every single abuse that people name that there could be with any degree of single payer healthcare, they're suffering right now. Like they complain about, oh, they're not going to cover things. Like it's what you're currently going through. They complain about, oh, they're gonna make healthcare unaffordable. I mean, look at doctors right now; they're making less than ever. Like it's the industry's falling the fuck apart. I mean, like they're squeezing them dry. It used to be a very like well-paying profession, and now it's like half. They say we're going to lose control of all of our prescriptions because the government's going to run it. I mean, like, who makes all of your antibiotics? Literally every single one of them. China. They could just stop making them for you one day, What are you going to do about it? Because that's the end of any serious surgery. That's the end of fixing a broken bone where it's sticking out of you. That's the end of every organ transplant. Just losing these chemicals. And it won't matter to like the elite, like the rich can just buy things off the market. But like it's going to affect literally everyone else in the country. Of
course. Yeah. And what was I going to say? Oh, I was just going to make a point of how a lot of our pharmaceuticals come from China.
Right? Yeah, a lot.
Well, I think that's a problem. Depending
on
one
of the best ways that you one of the best ways you encourage sourcing things from America is you have the government buy it.
Yeah, they can invest in it.
And I mean, like, do police buy cars from Volkswagen, or do they buy them from Chevy and Ford?
Exactly. I think that with something like pharmaceuticals or just healthcare in general, it's just better run for the government. There's more for them to invest. There's more money for them to invest in it.
Yeah.
It isn't like a business with like limitations on a budget and stuff. This United States government holds the power to issue currency, or they get the Federal Reserve to do it. But nonetheless, we hold the reserve currency. We can invest long term in these things.
We shouldn't depend on that for our financial well-being, though. Like that should be a nice to have, but not a need.
Right.
We shouldn't need that flex. Like the fact that we need that flex indicates that we're unhealthy.
Well, I'll tell you that government, quite frankly, government-run healthcare would be more affordable. I'll tell you that much.
It would be more efficient. It would be more efficient, and it would encourage manufacturing of drugs inside the United States.
Although there's always this hypothetical that's presented about single-payer healthcare or Medicare for all, as they call it, that wait times be so
for now, though, that's my problem with them. Like they're all afraid of all these big bad things that socialist medicine will do that they're actually already suffering under the current system.
Right. I don't know. Would wait times really be a problem? Like, I don't think it would.
You already have them.
Exactly. And that's not just that. We could reprioritize.
Like, have you tried booking an appointment with a specialist lately?
Yeah, it's pretty hard. What was I gonna say? Oh, the wait time. I mean, if that's gonna, let's say it's gonna be a problem, right? Let's say that way. We can easily reprioritize things to make.
I mean, you can change things at any point to when you don't like something.
Well, there's there's always this argument about how there's certain people that will just die because they're waiting too long for life-saving treatment or something, right?
That's happening right now.
Yeah, it is. That's also a good point.
Like really, like every single complaint people make, like it's happening right now.
But what's better though? You being able, because the wait times, I mean, they're going to be there somewhere, regardless, right? I would imagine. What would you rather have? Would you rather have people struggling to pay for like cancer treatments, to where they're in medical debt? Sometimes they might even have their treatment revoked if they aren't making enough payments in a certain time frame, and then they don't get treated
most
anyway.
often they'll get patient assistant programs, where they'll get the medication for quote unquote free, and then they will take that as a charitable contribution in their taxes, and they'll pay less taxes on the basis of giving patients quote unquote free medicine.
Right.
So like it tends to turn out to be like a way that companies get out of paying taxes, which by the way hits your bottom line. So, that's basically socialist medicine, but in a contrived, weird way.
Well, the problem with the current system, like the Affordable Care Act, they brought some pretty great things, I would say. Like, I think that was pretty good, relatively speaking, but the problem with the ACA, or the way they did it with the public option, is it's kind of like, I could be wrong in the way I'm wording this, but it's kind of like crony capitalist medicine.
Yeah, it is. But it always has been.
Right, but and as long as we have crony capitalist medicine, I mean, it pretty much always has been. You're right. As long as we have crony capitalist medicine, there's always going to be capitalist interest in it, and it's a need. Like medicine, health, I would say, is a need versus like a want majority of the time, right?
I mean, as long as medicine costs money, it will be capitalist driven.
Right. This is true with anything.
Unfortunately, medicine based on need has infinite demand.
Right, and the problem is that as long as you have corporate interests largely dealing with needs of people, there's always going to be people suffering, struggling to survive.
Again, because the demand is infinite, therefore the price can be anything.
Right, exactly. And so people's lives are held hostage to these people.
Yeah.
Like basically, it's kind of like, pay up if you want to live. You got to pay up if you want to survive. If you have, okay, let's say you get treatment for your MS, right?
Yeah.
So how's your coverage with that?
I have to enroll in a specialty program in order to get my medicine paid for.
Now,
because no insurance will pay for it, really.
See, no insurance will pay for it. The insurance companies don't want to.
Yeah, not really. Like they prefer you to go to the assistance program.
You had to enter a special program to get your medicine, essentially, for your multiple sclerosis.
Yeah, every medicine I've ever been on.
Right. And I imagine you'd be doing pretty bad without the medicine.
Yeah, I'd be permanently disabled.
Now, that specialty program, are you even guaranteed to be able to stay on that indefinitely?
No, they could rip it out at any point, but they just arbitrarily decided.
Exactly. So they can arbitrarily decide.
If the government decides we're actually going to tax you and you can't get away with that anymore, then yeah, they'll probably do that.
See? And as long as we exist under that system.
On the other hand, though, they'll probably lower their prices because otherwise nobody's buying the drug.
As long as we're under that system, though, they could just decide to take away your medicine anytime. You know, it's another thing is you know about the pre-existing condition provision of the Affordable Care Act, right? They have to cover pre-existing conditions and stuff. That's not true for everything. Only for conditions that they quote unquote can prove exist. So what that means is if you have a mental health condition, they don't count that as a pre-existing condition if you go into another insurance company or another source of getting coverage. You know that, right? Like if I go on to, like I'm on Blue Cross Blue Shield under my dad, right? For my bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
If I go to another insurer, including, let's say I get Medicare somehow, or like some kind of public option, one of those programs that they offer online, they don't have to cover my condition if they don't want to, or if they do cover it, they can pretty much just give whatever drugs they want to give you, even if it's not. And if they don't cover the drug that you originally were on, that they don't have to give it to you. So they can end up giving you drugs that don't work for you.
It's often the case. Like there's lots of people that have been on certain drugs like their entire lives to manage certain condition. For example, generic thyroid medication. It's really shit. Like the dosing of it is inconsistent and it goes up and down a lot. And the levels of what's in it like vary wildly. So doctors hate prescribing the generic. They prefer to prescribe the brand. But insurance companies bitch and moan over that, and they force you onto the generic anyways. And like you can go through all kinds of health problems if your thyroid is out of whack.
I actually used to be on a medicine called levothyroxine. I actually need to get back on it. But I haven't had like a primary care physician ever since my last one died. I just never went out and really got one. Or actually, no, I take that back. I went to another one, but it was only a few times, and I just haven't been back since.
I don't see the point of getting a primary care, to be honest with you. Just get a specialist that deals in that medicine. Primary cares don't do any work anymore. In our parents' days, when they were children, like they could get their tonsils removed by their general physician. Today, your general physician just books you at another doctor.
Right. And that's the other thing too. I noticed that they weren't that great. At least this newer, the last one. Yeah, I was told that I should basically go into I think it's called the endocrinologist or something like that. Endocrinologist. Is that what it's called? Like for my thyroid issue?
Yeah.
Yeah, endocrinologist.
Yeah.
But I just haven't been. But yeah, they gave me, when I got the thyroid medicine in the past, I think I got levothyroxine. That brand or not? I would think it is. I don't know. Yeah, man. But like, are you still there, Toggy?
Yeah.
So the point I was just gonna say earlier was that I was gonna actually connect it to the point that you made about institutions no longer existing. If you have people that are basically in a certain income zone, like lower to where they can't afford insurance, right? Or their employer doesn't really give that provide a company that gives very good coverage. And so if you have a mental health condition, Toggy, and they don't offer the drugs that work for you, you're fucked. You are, especially if you have schizophrenia or something like that, you're fucked. And what you're likely to experience is you, unless you have a really good support system, you're likely going to end up homeless.
Unless you run into the law, then you'll have a home, no problem.
Yeah, and then you'll be in prison, and
yeah,
yeah.
And of course, the courts don't recognize when people are mentally ill very well, and they don't really do anything helpful.
They're
like, hey, you should go to this mental health intervention while you're in pretrial for that felony.
Right.
Like that's how you're gonna focus on yourself, right?
As far as I know, like let's say that someone commits a crime and it's largely due to the mental health condition they have, right?
Right. Well, they do something that fits the letter of a crime, even though it's not the spirit of why you enforce it.
But you know what they do, right? The prosecution or like the people.
Right. You can always make an argument that you didn't have the mens rea for it, like you didn't have like the mind.
But they're going to say their whole standard is whether you knew what you were doing was right or wrong. And
yeah, that comes in many shades.
Huh?
That comes in many shades, especially when you're in a psychotic break.
Right. But their measure of you knowing whether you did right or wrong is very small. Like there's very few things that have to be present for you to be considered, oh yeah, you knew the difference.
I'm sorry, if you're in any kind of psychotic break, you probably don't have an entire grasp on the concept.
Even when you have psychotic breaks, a lot of the time they'll say that you knew the difference between right and wrong. Yeah, he was in a emotionally disturbed state, but he knew what he was doing was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, like, to what degree?
Right. And
like criminally? Like.
So what ends up happening
did they really have the presence of mind to be thinking that?
Exactly, but what ends up happening is you end up having a case where it's like a battle of the doctors, right? The prosecution has their witness, their medical witness saying, nah, he knew right from wrong. And then you have your witness saying the entire like opposite. And so it just becomes
if you win a case like that, you could end up being in a mental institution for longer than you'll be in jail.
Right, you could. And for how long? I mean,
until they say you're better.
Right. And it's not always when you're better too.
That's why like they'll just punitively leave you there.
That's why I'm kind of appeal to your idea of it was institutions you said that should be brought back.
I mean, yes, they should to some degree. Like replacing them with nothing was a bad idea.
They have mental hospitals, but at most they have like residential, which like lasts I think like a year or two or something. Like they don't. At some point they're gonna kick you out. Like even if you're there by not guilty of due to mental disease or defect, you're probably going to be kicked out even if you aren't better at some point. Because they'll
run out of money.
Right, they'll be like, we're sick of paying for you. I don't give
but
a
if
shit.
you're there under court order, it's different. You can be held there for years and years and years. You can be required to go to the court to ask to get out.
Yeah. I don't know. I imagine sometimes they'll just kick you out though after a while. It just depends.
I don't know. It wouldn't shock me.
Yeah. The whole reason, I mean, let's face it, I mean, a lot of this has to do with the fact that people aren't given adequate treatment if they're like of lower income status.
Yeah. Or they're not afforded opportunities to get out of like getting into shit.
Right.
Most of the people that sit like in jail for pretrial the entire time is just because they're poor.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Sotagi.
Yeah.
and I'm probably going to have like 20 more minutes on this and then end it and have it be like the second part and final part of the podcast. But so what do you think about I haven't heard anything official about it in the news, but I've heard reports that Republicans are thinking about introducing a bill. I think like it was some congressman with the name Buchanan or whatever, where it was tax cuts for the rich and the corporations that would add another $3.5 trillion to the deficit.
Keep in mind, those are projections of what it would take, because we don't know what future money will be made. We're extrapolating based on past money.
Sure.
But yeah. But
nonetheless, it's a huge tax break. It's another fucking tax break, which is insane because
when there's no indication that they need it.
They don't even need what they have now. They should be raised. They should raise the taxes on them. It's insane.
You would think, like, theoretically, if you're doing economically well, shouldn't you?
Right. And with Joe Biden these past 2 years, he's talked about having the rich pay their fair share, having the taxes raised, and have the legislation go through and all that. But nothing real has come of it. He proposed raising the corporate tax from 21 to 28%. I think he also talked about raising the income tax too for the rich and Build Back Better. But in the final bill, there was no tax raising for any of them. They just gave up on it. They didn't even really fight for it that hard in the first place, to be honest. I don't know if you disagree with that.
No, they really didn't. It was weak.
Of course. And I honestly think Biden doesn't really care.
It's like the whole thing was made up.
Exactly. Well, he answers to donors as well. Just like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and quite honestly, a lot of Democrats too. You know, I think Republicans are worse about it, but how much worse, I can't really say. I think a lot of them are having their strings pulled by wealthy donors. What was I going to say? Oh, you can see that this is true with the. Remember when the Silicon Valley Bank failed?
Yeah.
And they talked about it and everything. Do you know about that one Congress member, Barney? I think his name was Barney Frank or something like that.
Don't know.
I think him and there was a list of him and 26 or 27 other Democrats that decided that they just weren't going to vote for more regulation on these banks.
Yeah.
Because honestly, not as much as Republicans, not as many Democrats as Republicans are, but there's still
neither party's really been heavy on regulating finances.
Right. I just happen to think the Republicans have a higher volume of corporate shills, if that makes sense. I think the Democrats have less, but there's still enough.
I mean, they have plenty. They just have their own rich assholes.
Right. They have plenty. They have enough of them to where nothing major gets done in that front.
Mm-hmm.
They have enough. And it's unfortunate, but that's just how it goes. And as long as Citizens United decision stands, it's not going to change. As long as we don't reform our campaign financing laws, we're going to end up with the same kind of candidates. The ones that answer to those pro-business interests. The Supreme Court, by and large, has been this they're not elected, but they are appointed by different presidents that unfortunately also have their own ties to that world, because that's largely how they got elected.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if we reform campaign finance, I think that's a great step in the right direction. Because then we won't end up with so many people in power that are beholden to companies and what they want. I don't like. What do you think, Tagi?
Hard to say. Like, I honestly believe that to some degree, corporate interests might always rule in any society that holds property as like one of its core tenets.
Right, because money is
Right.
power, and
Just
assets are
property in
power.
general.
Well, it's interesting because there was something I heard the other day about the history of policing in this country, where they actually started off as being like basically like security that would protect like businesses' property, right?
Yeah, protectors of property.
Right, that's like their history, is just being protectors of property. White man's property, large amount of time, actually. Because remember, this country started off as having it to where I think it was only like white property owners that could vote, right?
Yeah, they were the only ones that were actually citizens.
Right. And then it started to regress over time. But even since like the passing of that civil rights legislation in the 60s, and even some voting, well, kind of weak voting bills, if any, we have still had attacks on people's right to vote, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole thing is kind of stupid to me, because like a voter ID, right? Let's say that we require people to have a voter ID to vote. Why can't we just make it free of charge?
I don't know. Probably
Why?
because it would take the fun out of it too much to close down DMVs right next to certain areas you want to suppress.
Right.
Just make them drive an hour out of their way for no good reason right before the election.
Because if Republicans were really about election integrity and making sure that people aren't committing fraud at the polls by making you have a voter ID to show for it, why can't they have it to where it's free to have a voter ID? I don't, doesn't that makes you wonder, and then you realize, oh, they don't want it to be easy for you to vote. They kind of voter ID, the way it's set up, it's kind of like a poll tax, really, but they can get away with saying it isn't because they're not directly charging you at the polls, right? But let's be honest, like having like an ID or like a license and charging people money for it, that's essentially a poll tax. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, it kind of is.
That it is a poll tax. And they know that a large percentage of people who are poor or in conditions where maybe they couldn't even afford a voter ID or even get to be able to get one, like transportation wise, maybe they don't have it, is people of color.
Well, just people that they want to suppress in general, just the poor.
Yeah. Yep. So really, like, you ever notice? So now that kind of reminds me. You know those police brutality interactions, right? That people have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Maybe like we're looking at it all wrong, because they like yeah, a large amount. But there's a good chunk that are black. If you apply it percentage wise of how much they are of the population, how much whites are. Maybe
poor defendants are a lot easier to have the charges stick.
Right. A lot of them just happen to be black. But really,
I mean,
it's about
they
the
can't
poor.
they can't get out of like pretrial again. Like they're stuck behind bars because like they can't they don't have the means of bail.
And that's my point.
Yeah.
All these police brutality videos you see, right? Like, let's say, like there was one I saw the other day. This white dude who had like dyed hair was at Walmart, right? He had a receipt. Right? But they still tackled him to the ground, had him handcuffed and everything. They had to literally get the physical receipt. They didn't even care about the witnesses saying, "Hey, he was in line. He had a receipt." They had to get.
And there was some court that recently affirmed that Walmart had the right to like hold people.
Right, but I think that's largely poor. Like even like police brutality instances, just in general, is largely poor people. You ever know? You don't really. When was the last time that you saw a person that was like upper middle class or like rich or whatever that was in a police brutality incident? When was the last time you saw that? Because mostly what I've seen are poor people.
I mean, like actually, you do see it more than you think. It's just, do the police think they can get away with it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you're poor, that probably makes them think that they're more likely to get away with it, right?
Yeah.
So like you, I don't know what your income stream is, but when you went to your
it's not just
house,
yours, it's the access of your income stream with your family and everybody that's going to pitch in, pretty much.
Right. So remember, well, obviously you remember. Why am I even asking? When you went to your mother's house, right?
I don't want to talk about that on podcasts.
Oh, my bad. But my bad, man. I honestly, I forgot for a second that I wasn't even on. Okay. But basically, you get my point, though, right?
Yeah.
They're more likely to do that bullshit if you, at least if you appear to be in a lower income status.
Or you look like that you won't be able to defend yourself.
Well, it's also the neighborhoods they police, right? There's typically a higher police presence in neighborhoods that are poor per capita versus ones that are richer per capita, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, man. It's really like just poor. Like let me ask you this: what do you think's more likely, that cops go to an apartment complex and go to the wrong apartment and shoot someone dead by mistake, or going to a house, a 2-story house in a nice neighborhood, and making that mistake?
No, definitely the apartment.
Right, exactly.
Or the townhouse that's like in the middle of like Anacostia, DC, or
it's like a majority of the time it's poor people that they do this shit to.
Yeah. And they never have to face the consequence, really.
Right.
Even when they do, like it's a taxpayer that foots the bill.
Exactly. I don't know how much this would help, but Jason's proposed this before. There was actually a mayoral candidate that proposed this, but he lost by large to the current mayor of my city. But there was a proposal where a police officer, in order for a person to be a cop in a community, they have to be a member of that community for a minimum amount of time.
Yeah.
So that they know the place they're policing. And one of the major problems of policing is that they bring in people who don't even know the place that they're in, right? They might outsource them from other areas. And if you don't understand the community you're policing, that's a problem, I would say. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
I think that's a good first step in the right direction. Another one would be there needs to be better background checks on for hiring police officers. There needs to be less, huh?
They just don't care.
Right. There needs to be less, what do you call it? Like, chances for them. And honestly, although this probably will never happen, but they at least need to, in part, get rid of their immunity that they have.
Yeah, I don't see the purpose of it.
Right. Well, even the current qualified immunity they have for police officers, a lot of time, how they actually handle it in practice when they have these situations involving these cops, I would say goes against the spirit of why they have qualified immunity as a thing in the first place. Right? Like, I don't think qualified immunity is meant to be there to just let cops get away with whatever they want. I would think I'm right about that.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's applied that way. There's some states where have you ever heard of a Veterans Preference Act?
No.
So they have states where, like, I think it was Minnesota, there was a case where this guy who worked at a jail as a corrections officer, he beat the shit out of this guy that they had restrained in a chair, right? Like a wheelchair or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just beat the shit out of this guy. And this corrections officer, he was, what's the word? He was guaranteed under the Veterans Preference Act, since he was a veteran, they guaranteed him arbitration, right? As something that he could go to for this. And a lot of times prosecutors won't even continue with a case if the defendant is guaranteed an arbiter as a result of them being a veteran. So he basically just got away with it. Like, he lost his job. He didn't go to prison or anything. He just lost his job after brutally assaulting this guy. This guy who's restrained, I might add. He didn't even have any ability to resist, right?
Did he get rehired?
Nope. Didn't get
anywhere
rehired.
else?
I think he became a coach or something of a basketball team or something. I'll have to look it up for you.
It's very common for them just to move or just work for the county over.
Right. He didn't do that, though. I think he just became a coach or something. But yeah, there's instances where people who basically commit wrongs, they just decide, yeah, you don't even have to go to a jury trial. You can just get arbitration. And the reason they didn't go forward with it is because it wasn't worth the gamble for them. They, by large, the arbiters favor like a corrections officer or something, or the veteran, I guess you would say in this instance, right? They'll just favor them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just insane to me. But that's the reality in some places, at least. Any finishing thoughts, Toggy, to this podcast? There's like a minute left.
I'm pretty burnt out. I had fun though. I'm pretty burnt out, but I had fun.
Oh yeah, I did too. I mean, this is just the first episode. I'm glad that I got this down.
Mm-hmm.
But
been
anyway.
a pleasure. Been a pleasure.
Yes, it has. Okay, well, thank you everyone for listening. I mean, I honestly don't even know how many people actually watch this, but thank you for listening. This has been your host, Dylan Ford, and our guest here, Toggy. And we bid you good night. Adios.